Welcome back to part 2 of Ready Lesson 18 for 7th grade. So we just finished reading about these two different scientific accounts about global warming, and so now we're going to continue on to the question. So the question here says, how does the focus of this account differ from the account on page 180? Is it A, instead of telling the cause of global warming, it explains an effect? B, instead of describing one solution, it tells about many possibilities? C, instead of talking about glacial ice, it describes polar bear habits? Or D, instead of naming climate changes, it warns of future problems? Well, looking at the answers, the best answer choice is A, because in the first account it tells about global warming while the second explains an effect of it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my circle tool and I'm going to circle A. Now, B is incorrect because the first account does not describe any possible solutions. C is incorrect because the second account talks about both glacial ice and polar bear habits. And D is incorrect because the second account warns of climate change and other future problems. Now let's move on to the show your thinking. It says, compare and contrast the key information presented in the two passages. What evidence, if any, do both include, and why has it been presented differently? So I'm going to take my typing tool and I'm going to give a sample response. The information from the first account focuses on the causes of global warming. In the text, it states, the burning of fossil fuels and other human activities, however, have changed the make-up of this protective covering. The protective covering is what's warming from increasing. The second account focuses on wildlife being at risk. In the article, it states, human habits that contribute to climate change, such as the use of fossil fuels, can stop the harmful effects of global warming on wildlife. And let me really quick put an answer here. And then it asks what evidence of both to include, and then why has it been presented differently. The information has been presented differently because each author has taken a different perspective on a similar topic. Okay, so there we go. We've got quite a long answer there. If I were you, I would pause, type this up, and then come back. Okay, let's move on to part 4. It says, read the following passages about desalination, or the removal of salt from water. Use the study buddies and closed readings to guide your reading. So some simple water science. If 70% of Earth's surface is covered in water, then why do news headlines warn us that water is scarce and that we're running out of it? The problem is that most of this water is salt water, which cannot be used by humans, most land animals, or plants. Only 2.5% is fresh water that can actually be drunk or used on to water crops. With all that salt water just floating around, it's natural to wonder if there's a way to remove the salt and make it usable. Well, there is, and the answer came from seabirds. A special membrane in the bird's throat will stop salt molecules but allow water molecules to pass through it. After years of studying this membrane, scientists have figured out how to copy this desalination technique using a process called reverse osmosis. To understand reverse osmosis, you must first understand osmosis itself. Picture a bowl with two compartments. Separating the two is a semi-impermeable membrane, a barrier that allows some molecules to pass through it but not others. One compartment holds fresh water and the other sugar water. Checking the bowl hours later, you discover that the sugar solution is less sweet than it has been. Osmosis has occurred. Molecules of water have traveled from the freshwater side, an area of no sugar concentration, to the sugar side, an area of high concentration, making the concentrations more equal. In reverse osmosis, the process is reversed. It maximizes areas of concentration instead of equalizing them. The process forces salt molecules in seawater, for example, to separate away from the water molecules rather than allowing them to mix together. Thus, fresh water is born. Today, special desalination plants work to remove salt from seawater, creating potable drinking water. Thanks to seabirds, these plants can help to solve the world's water problems. So let's look at the close read. It says, circle one piece of key information in each paragraph that helps you understand the author's most important ideas. So I'm going to take my circle tool right here. And I can see in the very first paragraph that it says only 2.5% of water is fresh, which is actually very important to what the author is trying to discuss. In the second paragraph, it says after years of studying this membrane, scientists have figured out how to copy this desalination technique, which is also very important. And in paragraph number 3, osmosis has occurred, which is the water molecules have traveled from freshwater side, with the area of high concentration, to an area of lower concentration. And then in paragraph 4, it says the process forces salt water molecules rather than allowing them to mix together, which is also important information. And then finally, in the last paragraph, it says these plants can help solve the world's water problem. Now, in the next part of the close read, it says what kind of information does the author include about desalination? Underline details about this process that help you understand it. So let's go ahead and let's look in the text to see what we can underline. So if we look, I can see that in the second paragraph, it says that the scientists were trying to copy the desalination technique, which is using a process called reverse osmosis. So I'm going to take my underlining tool and I'm going to underline this right here because they're trying to copy this. This is very important information about desalination. In the fourth paragraph, it says in reverse osmosis, the process is reversed. And in later on, it says the process forces salt water molecules in seawater to separate away from the water molecules. So this tells me what desalination is. Okay, now in part 3, we'll be reading the next source. So please go ahead and hold off for